Hi everyone, this is Jason, and welcome to another episode of Intimate Discourse. Today we're going to be talking about the state of Canada's military, the place for Canada's military in the world today, and where best to position ourselves. We'll be speaking about problems with recruitment and how to address those challenges going forward. We'll be talking about wokeism in the Canadian military and how that is currently instantiating. And we've got a guest here who will help us sort through some of these issues, and we're really happy that you can join us today in this exploration. This episode was recorded on March 19th of 2023 in Toronto, Canada. Thanks and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Jason, and I'm here with Dimitri.
Hello, everyone.
And a special guest we have today for you. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Hello, I'm Richard. I work with the Canadian Forces in recruiting in Western Canada. And thank you for having me on the show.
We're happy to have you.
Very nice.
So we're going to spend some of the time here today talking about the state of the Canadian military. And for you American listeners, yes, we do have one. Always keeping an eye out on South. It's very much modeled, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the British military in a lot of aspects.
Yes, that's right.
And I'm curious. I used to follow this a lot more than I did, but I'm curious where we are standing today in Canada. I only hear sort of the negative side of things in terms of how we keep sort of reducing our forces and this and that. But I really don't have anything. I really don't know more than what I hear on the news and what I sort of glean from that. But you're sort of obviously an insider here, and it would be great to get a better sort of inside perspective on that.
Well, you're right. We do have issues with equipment, and it's been procurement that's been the problem. So there's been a desire to obtain more newer equipment, especially aircraft, and it's taking forever. Now the ships are coming along. We are finally getting new ships, and they suit Canada's needs. They're not exactly straight up warfighting ships. They're ships that you can use for anything, whether it's humanitarian missions or supporting combat roles, that kind of thing. So they're really coming along with that nicely. Now, we still have a lot of catching up to do. And unfortunately, it's slow going. We seem to really fall down when it comes to that. Mm. Now, the good news is apparently there's not really much of a threat out there, because the one enemy we are afraid of has shown that they can't fight. And so if they can't take on a country that they can drive to, they certainly aren't coming for us anytime soon.
Well, they could always come over the north.
No, they're not coming over the north.
No, there's not going to be a ton of submarines attacking the north?
Yeah.
No.
A couple of questions here just on hardware. You mentioned the fighters, or you mentioned military
jet fighters, yeah.
The jet fighters. Are we still CF-18? Is that still the kind of?
It is for now. Yes.
Okay. Didn't they have a big order to get some recently, and it kind of got kiboshed a little?
It looks like it's going to finally happen. I believe it's the F-35 we're getting. Mm. I have to check that. It's a single engine jet, and we'll be getting that. And it's a much more current. The CF-18s we got in the 80s. It was like when Atari was big.
Right. Yeah, they've been hearing them for a while. Well, what is the progression of jet aircraft? I still hear the what was it, the F-15 or the Flying Eagle or whatever that it was called, like what was the one Maverick flew in Top Gun?
No, that was an F-14.
Was it an F-14?
Yeah, the Tomcat.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, those are cool. But I think they still, you still see that they still kind of have them, don't they? Like they don't really. They're not like cars, I guess.
You need them to train people sometimes, right? Like there's always a use for a jet. So if you're doing a war game, you're going to have your OPFOR, your opposing force. You want to maybe have dogfights with practice. I don't know if they're still on aircraft carriers or not. I haven't kept up with my recce, we'll say, with the on the American side, with what they've got. But yes, they still use some of those older aircraft. F-15s, I think, might even still be in use. I believe they have used them for electronic. They have electronic sensors, use them for electronics and electronic warfare sometimes. I have to check my facts again. I didn't come prepared for that. So
Now, Richard, I have a question. So the technological advances in these equipment, does it require more out of the pilots or less than 20 years ago?
I don't know. I'm hoping less.
So are they having a hard time filling these positions?
No, a lot of people want to be a pilot. That's one of the as somebody who works in recruiting, that is one thing we see. There's more than enough people that want to be pilot. Some of them, to their credit, are coming in with a lot of skills. They've angled their entire life towards becoming a pilot. Some of them were in air cadets. They got actual air hours, flight hours, flight time. They've done training. So we have no problem filling the pilot position.
Okay. Where's our deficiencies?
Our deficiencies? Engineering.
Oh.
Engineering and medical.
Interesting.
Engineering and medical, and here's the thing. Anyone who has engineering and medical, when they come to the Canadian Armed Forces, they have to have a background in that already. So you have to have an engineering degree, okay, just to apply for, if you want to be, let's say, a communication, electronics engineering, you have to have a degree. So these people with degrees can work anywhere they want because this is a real skill that companies can use. So they don't need to join the military. A lot of people come to the military coming because nobody else wants them, or they've we're paying more than they can make elsewhere. Engineers, they can get jobs. Medical people can get jobs. There's a huge demand for them. So that's what we're not getting.
Is this something that is experienced? It sounds like a problem that would be experienced by other armed forces. Like, do the Americans have the same problem with attracting high quality?
Most definitely, but I think Americans a little bit more have a more favorable viewpoint of their own military than Canada does. We don't seem to be cool anymore.
I see.
The Americans also have a huge population. So now what we are getting now is we are allowing permanent residents to apply, and a lot of permanent residents do have advanced degrees and are horribly underemployed for whatever reason. So it's not uncommon to see someone with an engineer and they're working at some menial job. Now, is that engineering degree worth its weight, or is it equivalent to a Canadian engineering degree? And we use a service to check that, to balance it. And we see that they assure us it is, so we have to trust that, and we have no other choice.
Well, that's the metric that's used, is whether the person who has the degree is claiming that it is the equivalent, or is this the service?
We
that
have
you
a
use?
service. There's a service that does that. It's called WES.
Okay.
And they verify that the person has a degree, and they compare it. They see where you got your degree from, and they tell us what the Canadian equivalency is. So a lot of times, some people might have a degree, and it comes back, this is the equivalent of a high school diploma.
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, sorry, you're not going to be an officer.
Yeah.
Right? And with the engineerings, some of these are legitimate engineering degree, and we're, okay, this person's could be an engineer with us, and you see what they do for a living, and it's just like, okay, now I get why they're joining the military.
So I guess pulling it back a little, like, there's just sort of a bird's eye view. What, in terms of Canada's current military readiness, would you identify that as the sort of number one problem? Is the problem obtaining specialists and or recruiting specialists?
No, I don't think so. I think equipment's our number one problem. are hampered by our ability to do things because of a lack of equipment. They wanted us to go into Haiti, and all of us were sitting around talking about them. We're like, with what? What will we take? Right? We just don't have we don't have anything.
Well, what do you mean equip? Like, maybe give some
Tanks, bullets.
Oh, really?
Right? So we don't really need specialists to do this kind of thing. What we need is gear.
Why is there a deficiency in that? Just budget?
I believe it's a procurement and budget.
And did we have more in the past?
We seemed to when we were in Afghanistan. We did, and even then we didn't have as much as the Americans. For instance, if a Canadian Forces member lost his night goggles, he wasn't going to have night goggles. Whereas Americans, they lose their night goggles. They go to their quartermaster or whatever they call it, and they get new ones. Right. So there's a huge difference, but we need equipment. Like a lot of people said, if we ever went to war, we'd probably run out of ammo the first day. So,
oh, wow.
And when we gave tanks and gear to the Ukrainians, we're scrounging.
And is this a federal? So this would be a federal level.
Yeah, federal level. Yeah.
Federal level, and so like historically, when you're in there, do you hear different things? Like if we had XYZ party in power, historically these issues didn't exist. Like, is it where are we at here? How much can we blame it on the current times?
I joined when Harper was in power, and it was the same.
Okay.
Right. With Trudeau, we at least we have ships coming now. Now those might have been Harper that started that ball rolling. I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know if Trudeau should get all the credit for that, but it's there, and we're happy. And it needs to be better. And then again, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's nothing happening that we need to be involved with. And maybe by keeping our military ineffective, it keeps us out of trouble. So they say, hey, can you go here? And we'd love to, but we can't. We just, we don't get the stuff,
And that goes to the argument of, Trump was always going on about how all these NATO countries need to raise their GDP or their military spending to what 2% of GDP or whatever it was supposed to be, which, if you're signed on as a signatory to a treaty,
a good partner.
That makes sense, to me. And maybe if we were doing that, then we would have the ability to at least
or more realistic numbers and follow through with them.
Yeah. Where is, for example, where are our forces mostly deployed? I know we have it's 12 frigates, 4 attack submarines. I looked this stuff up, just in preparation for this.
These are literally single-digit numbers.
Well, yeah, 4 attack submarines. Do we have any aircraft carriers? Or
no, we can't have an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers require such a huge crew. If we had one, all the other ships would probably be alongside.
That's amazing.
Just to crew it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? So, and the Navy's suffering from people more than any other branch in the Canadian Armed Forces. We are having a tremendous time getting people to join the Navy, and they're coming up with a new program that's going to get fast track people in, and we're a little worried about the background checks with that. Hopefully, they don't make the background checks too easy.
And would that be because
at the same time, it works for the Foreign Legion, so maybe it won't be that bad. Right? They just say, hey, do you want to join? Sir, what did you say your name was? Write it down. Okay, you're that guy.
Yeah, mercenaries.
So I don't know.
We'll give you citizenship if you're willing to take a bullet.
But the new Navy program is going to see people signing up, and the plan is to have them in uniform within a month.
Wow.
So considering it takes 6 months now, often or more, that's a big jump.
And when they first get into a uniform, so obviously we're not in a war. So what are they doing on a daily basis?
That's a really good question. I don't know.
So then maybe it's not so bad if they're like, well, I got a uniform, but I don't have to do much anyways.
It's going to be a try it, and if you like it, stay kind of thing. So they're going to give you general duties. You're going to work with different departments, see what trade feels good, and you'll after a year, you can either say, sorry, it's not for me, and leave, or hey, this is great. I'd like to be a naval communicator, or sonar operator or something.
And would you say like the bulk of the military recruits has always been white men, right?
It has, yeah.
Yeah. So the level of interest in the military career has been much less for other groups.
A lot of it is cultural. A lot of them don't see the military as something that is a career. It's something they're forced into if they need, you know.
True. And when you come from as an immigrant, a lot of these countries have mandatory conscription. So they're like, well, I did my 2 years or 1 year somewhere. Why would I make a career out of this?
Right. So you have that. So there's some of them, for instance, there was a group of Chinese soldiers that were Chinese Canadians who were appealing. They go to the Chinese community and explain what the Canadian Armed Forces does and that it is a legitimate career, because, you know, to the Hong Kong Chinese people, it's just like, you don't go into the military unless you're a loser and you have no other choice.
Well, it's like back in the day, like the trades, you know, oh, you have dyslexia, go do this trade, you know, you can drop out at grade 10 and off you go.
Exactly. And a lot of them don't even realize there's so much to do. Now, a lot of the new Canadians don't want to be soldiers. They want to be administrators.
Yeah.
Right? We were not getting a lot of people that actually want to be combat arms. And that's a bit of a problem too, right? Everybody wants to be an officer. Everybody wants to sit at a desk.
Yeah.
So tons of pilots, tons of people wanting to be intelligence officers, and, you know, very few people want to command tanks.
Is there, I know under the American Armed Forces, cyber is one of the individual divisions. Is Canada doesn't have that, right? It's Navy, Air Force. We've got the cyber. I know we have the cyber command, the border. What is it called? The
CSE, communications.
Something. Yeah, it's
CSE, I believe it's called.
Communication Securities Establishment or something like that. Yeah.
So there's that, but the military also have a cyber operator group. Oh, okay. These people actually they do cyber defense, but they also do offensive cyber.
Right, right.
And that's we're growing that. It's fairly new. We're growing it, and we're getting a lot of people because a lot of people want the experience. So there is an interest in that. But you got to be good.
Do you think that maybe the way things are going in terms of people not wanting to command tank divisions is because, you know, war is sort of evolving that way? Like now you have more cyber wars. Like this you know, the Russia-Ukraine thing is almost like an anomaly. Like you just don't see, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't see that kind of like actual war happen much anymore, like in Europe or in...
Oh no! When they fight, right? Like if you go anywhere where there's a hot spot, you need boots on the ground. You need artillery, machine guns, and tanks, right? If you're fighting an enemy that doesn't have computers, what's hacking going to do for you?
That's a good point. Yeah,
right.
They're going to hack into the Afghanistan.
It's amazing. Like low tech can go far away.
Yeah. The drones, I think, is going to be a big thing that gets bigger and bigger, unmanned, but. We still need the combat arms. Now, the problem is a lot of people think of the military as something to do for now, and they want a skill that they can use when they come out, right? So driving a tank's not going to do you very well.
It's like Rambo. Well. Remember the First Blood? At the end, he's like, I used to drive a tank, $1 billion worth of equipment in Afghanistan. Now I can't even drive a bus. Remember that? The ending part where he cries? It's really sad.
It's been a long time since I saw it.
He was a Vietnam vet, but that was the point was I had all these skills.
Yeah.
Then I was commanding people, and now I can't even be part of regular society. And these are the movies that, again, I hate to be more stereotypical. When you're an immigrant abroad and you want the picture of America, you're going to get your information anywhere you can, including movies.
So how is this something that is, for instance, like, how can this how can this be addressed? This kind of lack of interest in Canadian military. Is it a patriotic thing? Is it where is the
what they need to do, I think, is stop making it look fun on their advertisements and make it look like hard work. It worked for the Afghanistan ads with the black and white, fight fear, fight chaos, fight with the Canadian forces. Every scene looked miserable. Every scene looked hard. The weather was bad in every scene, and we had no shortage of applicants. But we also had a kind of a war we believed in, which also helped, and that's a huge issue. When there's a threat, we tend to get more recruits. Right. When there's no threat, people start saying, "Well, why do we need a military for anyway?" Right? That question has come up. The NDP has raised that question.
Right.
Right? And we have trouble getting people. The other thing is you want people wanting a challenge. Those are the best people.
Goes back to our earlier...
And they're the ones that stay, right?
Yeah.
Don't advertise it as skills for the future or anything like that, because it's not. There's so many things you think you're going to get qualifications that you can take. Like if you're a naval warfare officer, for instance, you're on a ship. None of the things you learn, other than maybe the sea time, are going to be accepted by the civilian world. It's just not. You're going to have to do it all again. Same with our vehicle techs. I don't even think they can be. You get mechanical skills, but you'll have to go to school and get your certificate still, because there's not going to be a certificate.
So would you argue then it's just better, we should just keep a really, like per capita, really small but really specialized armed forces? Be known at something, be good at if you want espionage or tech or something, and just really focus on one thing. Because it sounds like we're a jack of all trades, master of none.
Have something that you can scale fast when you need to. Have the ability to build it fast. When World War II started, we went from having a small navy to the fourth largest one in the world very quickly. It'd be nice to be able to do something like that.
Why have we lost that capacity?
Well, we don't do manufacturing here on that level anymore, right?
So it's also hard to justify. I mean, there's 35 million in Canada or something people, and then we have this massive border to defend.
True, but to be able to scale up nearly 75 to 100 years ago so quickly, and not have that ability today. Like you wonder sometimes you look at the pyramids and go, how could we fall back? Technological or societal or economic progress is really not consistent. Like you have to stay at it all the time or you can regress. So this sounds like we've regressed greatly in that particular capacity.
We're shooting ourselves in the foot too, because when you have something like Afghanistan and people see this and they see that we went there, died, come back with PTSD and all sorts of damage in our heads. And when I say us, I mean the military. I didn't go, and then we just walk away from it and it reverts right back to where it was, like nothing happened. And we think, okay, what's the point?
Memory.
Why would I want to do that? And why would anyone want to do that?
Yeah.
You can't blame them, right? We clearly wasted everybody's time and lives.
Yeah, I guess ultimately.
And ultimately, so, when the political climate changes or people, we just, get bored and go home, we think, well, what am I fighting for? What am I doing?
It's like Gran Torino. Did you guys see, was it Gran Torino, the Clint Eastwood movie?
I think
And he has like the nice, I think it's a Korean family next door to him.
Oh, yeah.
And he's still kind of like lost his, I defended my country against you people and all that sort of stuff, right? Or at least our values. And then, to the poor man's, dismay, like a couple decades later, the people that he was told were the enemy are moving in next door.
Yeah.
Like that gets in your head.
Yeah.
Because you're told, like, ramp up, be ready to die. These people are your enemy. Oh, and by the way, in a couple decades, their ancestors will be your neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, that's a hard thing, and it goes into immigration today in just the globalized world we live in.
But even in this case, it's like literally when you think of Afghanistan, I mean, it wasn't really that long ago. And then you have it's really the same situation. Like the Taliban are in charge there now, just as they were before. And it's
exactly the same situation, except we're taking them seriously now because we couldn't beat them.
Right.
And now it's almost like they're legitimized.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, again, low tech wins, and they have their country on the line.
They don't look at things. When they go to war, they look at it. How many generations is this going to take?
Exactly.
We look at it. How many years is this going to take?
Exactly.
And an insurgency war takes a long time.
Yeah.
Like it takes decades.
And we're talking in the older the culture, the more a fan of their own history they are. Meaning, like the more like, okay, we've been here for like 3,000 years as a culture, so this will be a 50-year period.
Hey, okay, let me ask you this, because I've wondered about this too, because I always thought there was something to this idea that, okay, we went into Afghanistan, and I'll say we, Canadian and America and the West or whatever.
Everybody.
Yeah. And so was the war justified in the first place? But more than that, should we have left? Because how long, what do you think, were we right to pull out of there, or should it have been done better or more smoothly, or?
I don't know. It's beyond my pay grade to answer that. I think some people say, some of the combat arms people who would have a better head for this than I would, they say we should have defeated the Taliban, then built up the country, right? Instead of trying to do everything at once.
But is the Taliban
Right.
an idea as much as it is a insurgency kind of army?
It is, and there's also it also something that kind of grows and expands because they can go to someone and say, "Do you want to make some money? Yeah. Here's an AK and a magazine. Fire it at a truck driving by at full auto, and here's some money. And this is somebody that doesn't, they're broke. They need money. They don't care either way, and they do it. So it was a mess, and I think the only way you either do that is you smash the hell out of them to begin with, or you just plan on staying a very long time and literally wait for the generation to change over.
Culture to change, yeah,
right?
for sure.
Get them the internet. That would be a
and you
great
can't just
way to
like
change.
it's a little ego or like I don't know, hubris. Like we're going to go in and build bridges and they're going to love us. No, not really, not yet. What do they even care about a bridge right now? They have other concerns.
This is an amazing story where they installed a water pump. Right, the women in a village would go and they would walk, an hour to a well and an hour or so back, and it would take a big portion of the day. So, the West, in all their wisdom, decided to put a well right in the middle of the village. Mm-hmm. Well, they destroyed it. And it found out the women destroyed it because their walk to the well to get their water was the best part of their day. They're free of all the men and everything like that. And we're thinking we're helping them.
And you need to know the cultural nuances.
Right.
For sure. Yeah, that's just our of course you need water. Who doesn't need water? Well, really get into that shows our ignorance in terms of the cultural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And but we had enough time to figure that out. Well, how many years was America there for?
A long time.
Decade plus,
They had 30 militaries in Afghanistan. Like everyone says, what's Canada doing there? Well, everybody's there. Yeah. What's Mongolia doing there? Mongolia was there. Romania was there. They had soldiers from Tonga there.
Coalition of the willing.
It was, everybody was there. So.
That was quite something, though, watching the airplanes take off and people falling off the airplanes.
That's so dramatic, yeah.
Yeah. So, and they were literally working with the Taliban, and cooperating and, okay, let's just do this.
It's hard. It's hard to defeat a culture. You literally have to be so slow. And because the other thing about putting a well in is even if it does satisfy a need, at a certain point, the average person's going to be like, yeah, but they're just trying to bribe us to like them. And so how do you help without coming off as a bribe? Mm-hmm. You literally have to have their own people involved in the decision-making process.
One thing that would work, though, if you can make a country prosperous, you can make it peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right? There's the underlying condition.
Who wants to fight when you have money?
Underlying condition with all of these places is poverty, right? When you have nothing to lose, you're willing to pick up a gun. And that's why I guess we've been lucky over here. There's been no revolution because we got too much to lose. We're too comfortable.
Yeah, but then we, not to divert again, and we won't go, but the whole freedom convoy, those people were on their last straw. People don't recognize that. When you're about to lose your job. Those were desperate people who wrote their MPs, did everything they could, and basically said, fuck it, I can't do anything more. And that's what we get result.
Yeah.
They were people that were hurting, right? So when the people in Afghanistan join these sort of Taliban groups, they're actually joining it from a position of powerlessness and pain.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that. There's the religion part of it too, obviously, but I do believe there's people joining a lot of this. And, certainly with the communist revolutions we've seen, it was out of that. It's some of these people, the countries that had communist revolutions, the people weren't really communists. That was their best chance of sorting things out in a more favorable way.
What kind of a role do you think that Canada or the U.S., I guess, speaking from Canadians, the reason we probably don't spend an inordinate amount of money on our military is just because we're relatively safe geographically. We've got the States right there, protected by a few oceans. Is how much of it, we went to Afghanistan, World War I, World War II, we were there a lot of the time. sort of fighting bravely. But do we, in the world we live in now, do you think would sort of pay for us to be more isolationist? Like, should we just sort of conserve our military for our defense, or is it worth it to go and spend money on other foreign wars?
That would be more cost effective.
Right.
The taxpayers are probably like that. It would be easier to staff. There's a lot of benefits to doing that, and a lot of countries do. You don't see Sweden sending their navy, over around the world or anything like that. But then you're going to have to accept that you're not a big player anymore. So there's that. But there are advantages to that kind of mindset. Just protect your borders, and hey, that might be the way forward. Right. And but you got to remember there's also Canadian interests that are worldwide as well, and also you might want to be able to help your allies. So having a blue water fleet that can sail to New Zealand and help if there's an earthquake there could be a good thing. If we're able to help when we get there, which is also sometimes questionable. We usually, our humanitarian responses are usually can be effective.
The reward in this is really keeping our Commonwealth connections alive.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah,
really. Because did they do favors? Do you know if there's favors back and forth? Like, well, if you send your ships, the coalition of the willing, wasn't that what they called originally in Afghanistan? Because nobody actually wanted.
Of course, maybe we'll give your the big company that puts all the money into the pension a nice contract or something, right? There's always
I wonder
a
what
business
the net.
behind it
I
all.
wonder what the net. Just like the royal family, like how much they cost the taxpayers and how much do they actually bring into the
right? Yeah.
Wonder what the net economic results are of having a Canadian military like this.
Well, when I just hear when Richard is talking about the sort of paucity of resources, and we're scrounging to send equipment to Ukraine, and meanwhile we have this massive sort of shortage of personnel and everything to defend sort of the homeland or whatever. It's like it seems to be a priority mismatch, as you're, at the end of the day, it's the same way that a company is beholden to its stockholders. Yeah. It's like, a country is beholden to its taxpayers, right?
Is it? Because if your main enemy, the main country that you consider a threat is in a state of war, and you have the ability to supply your gear to a country that's fighting it, in a way you're indirectly fighting. It might be one of the better ways to actually do it.
Maybe, yeah.
When you think about it, right? Because let's face it, that's who we're worried about. We're worried about Russia. We're going to name names. We're worried about Russia.
Aren't we worried about China more than we're worried about Russia?
We're worried about Iran. We're worried about China. We're worried about North Korea.
Right.
North Korea, because the guy might just be stupid enough to actually literally do something. Mm-hmm. China, I think, is probably the smartest out of all them and the least likely to actually do open war. I don't think they see open war as good for business, and making their country prosperous is their primary goal. That is their priority, is
as it should be,
keeping people prosperous in China. So if war isn't going to do that, they're not going to go to war.
Yeah.
Right?
I've had that debate before with a client who's of that background, Chinese, and he's like, prosper, money's everything. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a weirdo. I'm like, no. I was like, culture is everything. You got a good culture, you'll make money. But I don't know if it was like I was speaking a completely different language.
Well, prospering is also like, prospering, you have the money, then you can build the culture.
True. You lose your culture in the process of, I just found it very interesting. His focus was on the dollars and cents.
Right.
And I was like, screw the CPP and OAS. If it means like the country's going to be in better hands, I can live without it. I'll suffer. Because that's not what going to war is. You're going to suffer to make the next generation survive.
Right.
If I simply took a prosperous aspect and said, well, as long as I'm okay right now, screw the future, that would be really short-term thinking.
But they are about looking after the elderly there. That the older people in Chinese, the older people are the priority, right? It's the kids' job to look after the parents.
Yeah, I know. They have a village.
They have a mindset. Plus, when have you ever seen China take over another country? That's not how they do things. Tibet. They really
Taiwan soon.
Well, that's where it's going to get interesting.
Yeah.
And China is already an amalgamation of many countries at some point in time.
And then you have Japan ramping up their military like they've never done before since World War II. Mm-hmm. And you got to remember, China does not like Japan. To say there's a bit of bad blood would be an understatement.
Right.
That is a country that I could see China getting mad enough to go after.
Yeah.
And that would be, you don't want that. That would be bad because there would be emotion.
And the Koreans, I think, would be a little bit like ambivalent about who they're going to side with,
Korea would be on America's side. South Korea would be on America's side, full stop.
Right. That'd be a hot mess.
North Korea, as dangerous as they are, I think they would be completely incompetent and ineffective. Mm-hmm. I think South Korea is the only people that really got to worry about North Korea. And if America ever got worried or scared, God help them all, because I honestly think they could literally, if America really wanted to, they could smash Russia, China, and North Korea all at once, instantly. I don't even think I think it would be, everyone thinks that these countries have a chance. Russia's proven they can't fight. They can't even take a country on their border.
Right.
America took Iraq in they took Baghdad in 4 days, and Iraq having the fourth largest military in the world at the time, and
not really their natural terrain.
Fourth largest military.
America knows how to fight.
Yeah.
They know all their gear works. They know how to fight back. China would be like somebody learning to fight virtually by watching YouTube videos, getting into a boxing match with Mike Tyson in his prime. Right? Like, that's what it's.
Do you think America's military is still in its prime?
Oh, America's, no, it's not in its prime, but they're still awesome.
Right.
Right.
And they're heads and shoulders better than anyone else.
Anyone else. Okay. Anyone else. They got more, they're better, they know how it works. And, they have the numbers, they have the passion. And
they have the geographic look. They have the best geography possible.
But they can take the fight to your door.
Right?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter if you're on the other side. They will show up, and they'll take your country.
That's why Japan had to all but eliminate their Western fleet, when they did Pearl Harbor, because it's like that's their, as soon as that military machine grinds up and starts like churning out tanks and jets and everything like that, it's like game over. It's just a matter of time.
I'm really interested to see where the Japanese military are going with all their modifications, because it's going to be high tech.
Right.
And I'm hoping
it's a little bit of a stereotype there, Richard.
I'm hoping
coming out samurai styles.
I'm hoping the younger generation gets switched on. Mm-hmm. The younger people in all countries seem to be a lot weaker and less. They have less spirit, we'll say, and that's Canada, that's U.S., that's everywhere. And it'd be interesting to see if Japan can kind of, get things going a bit. I know United States, for instance, they have shortages in special forces because people just aren't fit enough.
Oh, really? So they still maintain the same standards?
Like, all their special forces are short-staffed.
Would you say the American military complex, is less, for lack of a better word, or sorry, but put it this way, more merit-oriented than we are still?
I can't tell. I don't know.
But they have the patriotism still.
They still have a lot of people that want to serve. They have that passion. They have people that, their family serve. They're going to serve. Despite maybe having other skills. It's like there's no not going in the military for some people. They really honestly believe in it.
Yeah, the rhetoric today, like just from a citizen's point of view, and having stepped away from the country for 10 years, and you come back and you kind of can feel a shift. Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't the same place I left, and it was just 10 years. Like, why would what I feel like people would say today, I can almost hear it coming off like a Trudeau-like leader's lips, is like, why would anyone want to defend such a rotten, racist country like Canada?
Well, we're not that racist.
I know, but that's how I totally agree. Obviously, the marching feet of immigrants will tell you that. But that's how they sell it, And so all of a sudden, if you're willing to die for a flag, because that flag meant something, but now you're told that flag, what it actually means is colonialism and the corporation of Canada. And like you said, why to go to Afghanistan and lose your, let's say, a limb or something, and then find out 5 years later that was all a waste?
We are definitely...
It's really demoralized, right?
Yes, and there are going to be people that see it that way, and they're not going to join us. But we still get people that want to join because they do believe in Canada, and they're out there. And we also have even new Canadians and permanent residences. We have, sometimes there's that optimism, and I like it when I see that. We had and as for wokeism, sometimes it works because we have the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test, which is a test to determine your suitability for the Canadian Forces, and it's challenging. Nobody ever gets perfect. If you get perfect, you're kind of considered a genius. We had one person I've seen one person get perfect, and it was a woman.
Nadia Comaneci.
And she had I was looking at her education background, PhD in physics. Okay, PhD. All right. And I'm like, this person's gonna, they're gonna send her to space. They're gonna put her on posters. It's gonna be, she's going in as pilot, and tremendous skills. And then I notice on the application, sex, M. She was trans. She was trans.
Oh, wow.
And she hit well, that explains a PhD in physics. I'm being completely misogynistic here, but you look at a graduating physics class and it's mostly men, right? You don't see many women and it's
but you would say it was good they hired such a person, right?
Oh yeah, or that someone felt comfortable
to
do it.
I would have because the merit is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that was and she was coming in on all skill. This was not political.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we're going to be seeing more of her.
And all the more respect, because the mountain that person had to climb was much harder than the average person.
Yeah.
So you got like determination, like they can see everything through to the end. Yeah, but you're right. Like it's not whether they're trans or not; it's whether they actually have merit or not. I wish this stuff would become as boring as hair color.
Yeah.
Like really, like we don't have enough blondes in the army. Like it'd just be absurd, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
Like why? It go on the merit of the person, not how they look superficially.
Well, but I'm just trying to think. So it's funny that they put a M on their application if they're. So are you saying they were born a man and they're like transitioned to a woman and now they're saying, "Oh, I'm actually a man"?
I'm wondering if the application, because apparently she had applied some time ago, and I'm thinking maybe it switched it during the process.
That's something you didn't. Yeah,
it's just a W loophole. Upside down, man. Don't worry about it.
It's interesting.
We were all very impressed, and everybody wanted to meet her because it's just you don't see that. You don't see those. Yeah, test levels.
It swells my heart with pride and joy. Like it's like, who is this kick-ass person?
Yeah,
it's like on Jeopardy. Amy Schneider, who is she's like a trans woman, but everybody was like, and it was like a champion for like, I don't know, 38 weeks or something crazy. And it was like, finally we have a female Jeopardy champion. It's like, well, it's actually a man.
But the point is this person didn't take themselves as a victim. And that's what I absolutely admire.
Not at all.
Exactly.
Fearlessly went in.
So if they can do it, everyone can do it. So why do we have to drop, are we dropping standards then for like, we have the guinea pig. It can be done.
We did drop the standards, and for a while now, the new fiscal year is having new standards, right? And some of them are up again, and I think it's because they had a deluge of like bad apples coming in with very bad scores. But for a while, if you were a woman and or a visible minority, you can come in, blow your nose on the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test, and we would try to find you a job. Whereas if you were a white male, you had to hit the standard.
Selecting anybody for race, whether in a positive or negative way, wouldn't that be racism?
It is, but we, unlike other government departments, we are very white and we are very male. And I think there's to reflect Canadian society, we need to maybe try to fix that, but I don't think it's something that can be forced, unfortunately.
And I agree with you completely. But I believe I heard this before about China. They try to say that they're all Chinese, but there's many different types of, I don't know, like how many languages do they have there? More than just, right? So that indicates the diversity of Asians that live in China that are considered by the government Chinese. Mm-hmm. But they actually would have quadrants of neighborhoods mandated to be in the racial breakdown of the society at large. So you wouldn't get like a one suburb that's known as Little Italy or another suburb as Little Portugal. They're like, well, if 10% of Canada is Italians and 18% Black and 15% Chinese, we want every single sector of the new suburbs being built to be reflective of that percentage. So society, everywhere you went, reflected in the micro version the macro diversity of the country. So when I hear that,
China could do that. I don't think we could ever, but I don't.
But they're kind of trying to do that. Like it's the same idea. Like, well, we needed to reflect society at large. Yeah. It's pretty much the same thing, and I don't disagree with it in theory. It's what you said. It's like forcing it onto people.
You can't force it.
That and trying to fake it. You're faking it because here's the other thing. So you have all these people that are visible minorities and women joining and with substandard scores. That's probably going to be the easiest test they ever do. Are they going to get through the training system, or are we going to lower those tests as well? Right. So I have two theories. One, they might just lower everything, put them in uniform, and give them a job where they can't do any damage, or they might just let them in. Say, hey, look at all these, wonderful, diverse people we recruited. We recruited X amount of, visible minorities. Aren't we great? Pat ourselves on the back. But, oh, by the way, none of them passed, but we'll leave that part out.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, you're lowering the, I think Canadians have a expectation that their military, well, really that any government department is going to be of a certain level. And, I don't even think people would consider that it would be worthy to lower that level just so that we can meet some racial quota or gender quota or whatever.
And I'd be interested to know if these people would want that.
Right.
Would you want to get a job knowing that's how you got it?
I'd slap them silly.
Probably not.
Yeah. I don't think they would.
Well, some people, would want a job, regardless, right? Like, I could see you might want to take advantage of it if you have the ability.
I guess if it's between that and not working.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You have to be pretty low to accept that as your mechanism of allowing you to move up, though.
Yeah.
Like if your life is going to have meaning, of course people need a little help here and there, but to I heard this about the Ivy League schools in the States. They want to have the breakdown racially of their graduates, of their admissions and graduates, exactly as society is. So they've actually broken it down. This percentage of this percentage of that, male, female, on and on. And when they don't get those applications that meet the SAT scores, they start accepting people into the program of the missing quadrants of the racial breakdown they're looking for who haven't even written the SATs.
Oh, wow.
So now they're graduating, they're getting hired by Google and stuff, and Google's like, this diploma doesn't actually mean much. But they're from the right school, so we'll give them a pseudo IQ test. We'll call it something else, but it's really an IQ test. And if they can pass it, then we'll just train them ourselves here.
They've lowered their own brand that way.
Yeah,
exactly. And if you wanted a single mechanism to destroy a culture, it'd be getting rid of merit.
Yeah.
And so this is the problem I have with wokeism. It's not that it has a bad idea, like it's inherently just bad. There's some good in it. It's that it's infected nearly every branch of society. And so if evangelical Christianity, you could say there's some good to it or bad. I really don't care. But I wouldn't want it to be installed as a de facto ethos in every single branch of society. So why does this one new philosophy, let's call it ethos, get to be the de facto, you're either all in or all out? Because at a certain point, you're going to tap out and go, you know what, I just can't go any further with this. And Jason's going to say the same thing, and your wife might say something else, and your mother might say something else. It doesn't really matter when. The problem is as soon as you decide you're no longer in, you're completely all out. That's really fascist.
Yes, it is.
Right? So then it's forcing you to stay in. So then if I accept that job based on color, I'm being part of that cloud of like a singular thought that it says it's diverse. But the second you try to diverge from that, it's not actually, it's diverse in everything that matters. Not matters. It's not diverse in thought.
And it's having an opposite effect. I mean, you basically, you're getting a mental backlash all the way through with it. Everybody I work with, nobody likes it, right? Nobody believes in this.
And if we voted nationally on this, whether you'd ask about bathrooms or whatever the topic du jour is, nobody would actually agree to it.
We vote nationally on it though, and people still vote Trudeau in. I mean, there was a big part of like his platform, you know, especially the second. You want to say, okay, the first time around you didn't want to do it, but the second and third time around, it's like.
So you think that was affirmation of wokeism?
Yeah, I think of course it validates it. I mean, and I think maybe it's not, maybe if you took that one issue and asked everybody individually, you'd get a lower amount, but overall, it didn't matter to enough people to not vote him in again.
Well, to Richard's point, we're a pretty prosperous country, and I think people simply overlook those things as long as their pockets are lined.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think that's where we're at.
Here's the other issue: is there's a lot of people that make a living sniffing out problems like racism and stuff like that now, and if they don't find it, well, you know, we don't need you now. Yeah. So it's very witch hunty.
Yeah,
and so sometimes they'll take
a religion.
They take a very small thing and blow it up huge.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, the new words every day you turn on, like you can't say, what's the new one now? You say, you gypped me. Come on, we all grew up saying that as a kid, and that's supposed to be bad because you're referring to gypsies who are Roma. You know, like...
You say, oh, there's white supremacists in the Canadian Armed Forces. Okay, there were a couple of, you know, numpties that were part of Sons of Odin or something like that, you know, and these were rangers out in the middle of nowhere. And, I mean, rangers work with a lot of First Nation people, so obviously they weren't... Were they
culturally sensitive?
Maybe
enough?
They weren't as sensitive, or maybe they weren't as racist as we like to think they were. You know, if you work around you know, other cultures all the time, or culture that's not yours, but anyway, and so they say, oh, they're afraid of white supremacists in the military. They're investigating it. They're, you know, looking into it. There's all these, you know, research. There's a researcher coming on to look into it, and I'm thinking, okay, so there was like what, 2 guys in the Sons of Odin, out of all that they found, and then there was the reservist that was part of the base, and I think he probably scared people more than any of the other guys did. But I mean, that's not a big problem when you think of it percentage wise.
And they tried to extrapolate that over all white men there.
Yeah, like they're really worried about it, and
that's like me calling every Indian and Pakistani person a Taliban.
Yeah,
right. Like why that wouldn't be acceptable.
So they're not coming right out and saying it, but they're definitely, they've got microscopes on us and everything, and you know, it'll be interesting to see what they say. But on the backside, you're getting a lot of people that are. They're not caring as much. They're tired of walking on eggshells, and they're not playing the game anymore.
You mentioned some standards were going to be shifting. These are, I assume, like test standards or something like that. When is that? Like, what precipitated that? Like, you know what I mean? Why are they doing that now?
A lot of it's based on demand for the trade. So if there's a trade that everybody's applying for, let's say intelligence officer. They put the demand. They will put the demand, the level. They'll set it higher.
I see.
Right now, something like an engineer. They need engineers. All they'll ask for is you have an engineer degree. If you don't do well on the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test, we will take a look at you anyway. Right, and we'll see if you know you don't have a lot of competition, you might get in.
Is there does the race or the like gender of the applicant figure at all into the hiring process for a lot of these?
I suspect it does. When all things are equal, I think it will. I honestly think you will have a better shot if you're a visible minority or a woman in some cases. For instance, at a recruiting center, you know, one of the people got hired was a white male, and I was really surprised. I'm like, they hired a white male, and they said, well, nobody else applied. Right? They didn't want a white male.
Right.
But that was the only person that applied. Huh. So they got the new recruiting officer was a white male.
So white male intelligence officers are probably less likely to, like, they're probably, you know, since you have a surplus in people applying for that job, right, the pool of non-whites are much higher, and therefore,
right. But they do look at everything apparently. So
who makes these decisions? Like, who are the ones doing the hiring?
It's based on the Canadian Forces Recruiting Group will determine how to evaluate an applicant, right? So there'll be scores. So the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test is part of it.
Okay.
Right? There's a personality test that's part of it. And then your education will be factored in, right? So certain levels of degrees are certain levels and certain degrees are more desirable than others. Mm-hmm. So that's all taken into account. Also your leadership experience, right? And also what we got with, especially the intelligence world, is we have a lot of people applying with social science degrees. And these people are older, and they can't make it anywhere that well with their useless social science degree. And they want to be an intelligence officer. They probably think it's glamorous. It's not. And they end up applying, and so we get a lot of old people, out of shape people going into that branch. It's kind of become the dumping ground, to be honest, really? Because it's one of the only branches where they will take any degree, and they will give you you can have a degree in underwater basket weaving and have a shot at it.
But isn't that the one they'd be more selective of because they have more people applying to do it? Or is that all, the majority of the candidates?
I honestly hope so. We're going to find out, right? Because we just started doing this, and they're not through the system yet, so we'll see how these people do. The other trade that a lot of people could do with any degree is like the combat arms trades and naval warfare officer, which is work on a ship. Nobody wants to do that. They don't want to do the hard stuff. They want the nice desk job inside with the air conditioning.
I'm surprised because I would think when I was a kid, it was kind of you would want to be you said fighter pilot's like one of the top ones, but I would think you'd want to be a soldier or something. I wouldn't want to get it. If I wanted a desk job, I'd just get a desk job at any office.
Is the promotion path quicker in combat?
Yeah.
See, that's how they get you.
It is. If you're combat arms or a naval warfare officer, you're a hard leader, and these are the people that will go up the ranks faster. And but this is somebody that wants to stay in the military. Now, if you're looking just to build your skills, so you have something to take the civilian world, different. You're not going to want to lead an artillery team or an artillery battery. You want cyber operator, so you have the computer skills or something like that, or the telecommunication related people, that sort of thing. To me, one of the best ones would be cook. You can get your Red Seal, right? And a lot of our cooks get pilfered by, oil rigs. They come work at our oil rig for $50 an hour in the military, but
wasn't that Steven Seagal? Under siege, like you've never seen him before.
Yeah.
I doubt that happened. A SEAL becoming a cook? No. No.
Could you just diverting back? Do you think, in a sense, I just had this thought when you were talking, could wokeism be the ultimate PR mechanism for the army, so that when we go across and do atrocities, we have this amazing congruency between the media and the government messaging and the military, that then we don't get backlash like the Americans had with the Vietnam War? Imagine that, because in the Vietnam War,
I think it would definitely
give
more empathy, right? If you have different cultures and things like that, and it gives you legitimacy.
And the language, you'd speak the language.
Well, because it becomes it's for the idea as opposed to the colonialist white man went to Afghanistan and smashed it. Well, you can't really say that when it's women and trans and everybody other color. So it allows them to achieve the mission. And by mission, I mean having the populace buy into the mission a lot easier, because you're selling it to them as a more benign. It's not because we don't hate them. It's it's just politics, man. That kind of thing.
That's a good point.
It's a weapon. Because, in 1960s, the media was far more independent in America. And they went across. When the soldiers came back, they're all like, well, you're a baby killer. So to avoid that from happening, you simply merge, you embed the media with the military more. So it's instead of the media's watching the military, you're eating food together. You're on the plane together. You're a lot less likely to talk bad about them. You're going to see it from their perspective more.
Right.
So you start that ball rolling down to the point where now you have, the united colors of everybody there too, which is a nice idea, but I think they're almost weaponizing the people's color to get the mission done.
That's a good point. I think you might be onto something there.
Right? And that's why they're willing to go with substandards, because in the end, it doesn't really matter because they need the country to buy into it.
Right. Well, that is what kills wars, right? Is the political will.
Yeah. You have to believe in Rome if you're going to keep fighting for Rome.
Right?
I think you're giving too much credit to our government thinking that far ahead.
Yeah, I know what, man. If I could think it, someone else must have thought
I actually think you might be
You
onto
tell me
something.
that way too often.
I think you might be onto something with that. I think that you are correct, actually. I would say that is something that...
It's camouflage.
It's
just camouflage of a different sort, right?
And it gives us legitimacy, right?
Moral legitimacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need that.
Best kind.
Because, if we don't have that, there'd be so much pressure to pull out.
Especially in this sort of like, we're such a bad country. We've done colonialism. Look, we're over there in the Middle East now. How do you combat that kind of rhetoric? You go this route.
Right.
How much of a push into is there a noticeable shift in the military toward like cyber operations and kind of scaling back on I almost want to say like interventionists, like going into Afghanistan being a good example. I don't want to call it adventurism because I do think that Afghanistan, when that happened, it made sense to go in there. But
the cyber opera world is it's very secret. It's shielded from my eyes. I don't get a view into it, and
you must hear higher numbers.
I can't answer that question about the cyber opera because I honestly don't know. I also do know that we are a lot more places than people realize.
Oh, really?
Yes. And a lot of it is United Nations work. Okay, so peacekeeping. We're all over Africa. You never hear about it, but we're there. We're in Democratic Republic of Congo. We're in Uganda. I think there's a bunch of countries in that area. We work with the Nigerians occasionally. I think
is it humanitarian relief or something?
Or training sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of
Nigerian
that also
princes?
No, like we even the Naval Reserve sailed one of their warships to Nigeria and worked with Nigerians doing counter-piracy practice. Right? They have
When I lived in Cyprus, I lived there for like a year, and the place I was working was literally 75 meters from the Green Line, which separated the Turkish part from the Greek part, and there was Canadian peacekeepers that were there.
Oh, that'd be a sweet post.
Yeah, it truly was. But I did feel at the time proud.
Yeah.
Not like, like this is some sort of like colonial whatever. It's like, no, they're there. They're in a helping kind of states. Canada's kind of like the Switzerland of North America. I actually felt really proud to see them. And I try to always strike up a conversation with them.
We've had peacekeepers in Mali, and a lot of people are saying, well, in order to have peacekeepers, both sides need to have peace, right? ISIS doesn't want peace. So why are we sending peacekeepers? And the Malian government ended up saying, we'd really like to work with Wagner from Russia. And we were like, we're out. We went home, and I think the French even went home. And Mali's using Wagner now. So good luck with that.
Who's Wagner?
They're the Russian mercenary group.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right, Richard. So I just wanted to ask you something about the Canadian military here. So a little while ago, there was a pretty famous high-level general that I believe retired. His last name was Maisonneuve. And this was one of his quotes. He had his retirement speech, and he got in pretty hot water for it and had to roll back some of his statements, which is sad and ironic because his statements were actually about trying not to roll back things and move forward in the world. So even he had to pull back.
It's always a shame when people, it's just such a, somebody makes, and you're about to read it, so I don't know, but when somebody says something from the heart and then they have to kind of go back and qualify things, it's just unfortunate. I think it's this.
It's like when you're like saying, I'm going to tell you how, I'm going to tell you how like it is.
Yeah.
But I didn't really mean to go quite like that much.
Right.
Where's the fine line? So yeah, his one of his sentences was, Canada's prosperity is being sacrificed at the altar of climate change, as opposed to being used to help the world transition to clean energy. Throwing soup and paint at the world's art treasures is as heinous as it is useless. The perpetrator should be punished, not celebrated.
Well, as an art fan, I agree. I agree with that. I'm not really qualified to talk about climate change, as I'm not a scientist, but I think some of this stuff again is they're taking it to extremes, as they always do. But yeah, I agree with them. Throwing stuff at art is absolutely ridiculous. It's attention seeking. It sounds like someone throwing a temper tantrum and wanting attention.
It's useless.
It is useless.
And his other part about prosperity, he's not saying don't transition. He's saying use the prosperity to transition to clean energy, as opposed to sacrificing the prosperity at the altar, meaning it's more of an ethos and a religion ideology of climate change.
Now, unfortunately, being a general means he has to toe the line of the government more than everybody else does. Now, the thing is, he's retired, so why would he care?
His last hurrah, he's pissed off. He's gone as far as he can.
Yeah. So
why would he?
Why would he?
Why would he have to walk it back? You mean?
Why would he have to walk it back if he's already retired?
Yeah, good point. I don't know how this works. Your reputation, you don't want to burn.
Maybe your pension is
maybe
threatened.
Maybe
who knows what behind the scenes?
Ways of
He thought he had more power than he actually had.
Yeah.
And then realized
they don't. Right? We answer to the government, which is why we have to always support them.
But
whether we believe it or not.
What is a government? So Trudeau, some guy in power for 4 years. I'm supposed to be like, ooh, and 4 years from now he might be working at McDonald's.
4 years.
What is it? It's very transitional sort of thing. Whereas a military in this man's career or a queen will far exceed any one leader's tenure as a prime minister or president.
Yeah.
I don't know why we give them such a high altar. You got to have respect. You got to have an order of command. But they're really transitional. How many
the press too, and you get the pressures of
how many prime ministers were in Queen Elizabeth's reign? Some crazy number,
A lot of people were a lot of the old guard in the military were frustrated over the new uniforms and the hair regulations. Basically, you were allowed now to dye your hair pink and curl it down to your shoulders if you wish.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off on that point. I'll read you his quote regarding that.
Okay.
He also said, "Today I see the military woefully underfunded, undermanned, and underappreciated. A force where uniforms have become a means of personal expression rather than a symbol of collective pride and unity. Uniforms are no longer uniform."
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't as bad as they thought. Apparently, a lot of the people who were in uniform joined because they believed in the old military. We're not seeing we're not seeing a lot of people with dyed hair or long hair. Every now and then, people might keep it a little longer, but it never reached the extreme we expected, because the people that do that they don't want to be in the military, right? So it never really happened. Where I work, there's one guy who's got long hair. That's it. And
so the culture has remained intact.
The culture has remained intact. And the one guy with longer hair, he's it's not that long. It's not extreme. It's not like what it used to be.
Yeah.
The one thing you do see are beards, though. Everybody's grown beards, and beards for a while it was the Navy were allowed to have beards, but the Army and the Air Force weren't for a long time, and then they allowed it. So a lot of people with beards, a lot of people with longer beards. But the thing is, if you deploy and you have to wear a gas mask or something, your beard's got to go. So there's still that, and
and they can force that, right?
Yeah, and you're going to want to.
Of course,
honest, right? And the same with earrings. Okay, fine, you wear your earrings, working Monday to Friday. If you're doing formal, you take your earrings out. And if you're deployed, you're going to take your earrings out. But when you're deployed, you're very busy and have other things, more pressing things to worry about. Yeah. So a lot of this, relaxed uniform regulations, if anything, it just made your sergeants and your sergeant majors and your coxswains and your chief and petty officers' jobs, they're the people that enforce the discipline. You made their lives easier because now they don't have to crack down on people if their hair is touching their collars. But it didn't. The people that are coming to us weren't that kind of person to begin with. So it doesn't really happen that
maybe 20 years from now, though, this will be won't age very well. I don't know.
I don't know. We'll see. The some people did say they encountered a lack of respect for ranks when this happened. Like there were rumors of that. I've not really seen it myself. But the one thing that I'm waiting, the one big shoe to drop is going to be what's going to become of our relationship with the royal family. Because I have a feeling that is set to change. Because I'm sorry, but the new guy just doesn't have the same pull that the Queen did.
Yeah.
And but we still swear allegiance to the King of Canada when we do our enrollments.
And it's king now. Did it feel weird saying it?
It says it feels weird. King Charles III, King of Canada, and I'm sure it's weird saying it back to me, but they all do. And but I sense that's going to be going away soon.
Is the Queen still on our money right nowadays? Is she on cash still? Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're going to have King Charles on our money?
I guess.
Unless it changes, and we'll see, because the attitude is not. It almost feels like, okay, that's over with now. Let's do something different. Because
and does that feel fresh and forward thinking, or like what does it feel like?
I'm good either way, because it's even someone that's British ancestry, such as I am, I have to wonder, do we move on?
Okay.
I don't know what to say. I'm good going with the flow on this. And I know, like Quebec, for instance, Quebec really doesn't like it.
Oh, of course.
And
culture's a
Quebec's
different culture.
A huge part of the military. I mean, you want to, your traditional Canadian Armed Forces.
Quebecer.
You go to Quebec, right? Like those guys are it. So
feisty bunch.
We'll see.
Yeah, I had this theory. I don't know if you ever heard it. I'm not a fan of, what you're supposed to think, like the Queen was like ordained by God and therefore she has authority. Yeah, obviously, these are at best outdated ideas, but in each country is different, and so Canada would be different from the UK on this one. But in the UK's case, we have three branches of government. You got like judicial, legislative, and executive. I would say the Queen for the Brits represents a fourth layer of government, symbolic.
Yeah.
And that actually is the umbrella which everybody can fall under. And when you have a lot of, and even more so with a newer country like they are versus like the Middle East or the Mediterranean, and the high amount of immigration, finding those cultural waypoints where people can go, that's what our culture is. It helps bind the culture together. Now, we don't feel that as much in Canada because we're not the UK and we have a different dynamic. But we feel it a little bit because we are like an extended family of the Commonwealth, exactly. For instance, like I would say the Italians wouldn't need that because that role of symbolic government would be taken by the Pope.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you're left, right, center. Most of them still probably believe in God. They fall underneath that branch. They ties their culture together. Or they can look at their ancient Roman culture and go, well, that ties us together. But a culture needs something to tie itself together. And I think that's what the Brits still find valuable in the royal family.
Yeah, but Canada's a little different, and like
especially the Quebecers. To your point,
when the Queen died, there were people in uniform that they weren't the least bit upset because they were coming from countries where they really felt like they were harmed by England.
Fair enough.
And so it was interesting hearing their perspective, right? So. I don't know. We'll see. Well, when you got the whole world living in one spot, or people from the whole world living in one spot, you're going to definitely have different attitudes.
It's been interesting. There's a guy from the UK, from Vancouver. I believe he's at UBC, and a professor, and he's the one that makes the case for colonialization. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong. He's like, can we just talk about it a little bit in an academic setting? And he'll be like, do you want to be Haiti? Or do you want to be Aruba?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Like, let's actually take a measurement of, like a case scenario. Yeah. And try to actually see what happens.
Well, it's true.
Right. And not that it's a uniformly good or uniformly bad. There's going to be pockets of everything. But if you can kind of come together like to an aggregate of what this actually meant to the world, was it a force overall for positive change or negative change? At least it merits the conversation. So those people that are complaining are going to be seeing their own little world's view, and rightly so. They might have been very much harmed by these people. But if you step back and look at the entire global perspective of it all, what was the net effect?
There was a lot of unification under colonialism.
I know.
So, but there was a lot of exploitation too.
Of course. But which was there not on those lands prior? What was this? What was the landscape beforehand? I'm just saying it needs to be discussed in an open academic sort of way. Not like, well, how dare you? You're supporting XYZ. We're just not even going to talk about that. Because that's not science. That's not academic anything. That's just ideology.
Yeah. I think it's important, to have, I think tradition's important. I think, I would imagine, especially in like the military or something that is more formal, and there needs to be something that binds everybody together. Like you can't have, especially a country like Canada that has so many different backgrounds coming into, like you said, like one place. It's like you need to have a common thing you're fighting for,
Look, you're going to see the world through some form of structure. That could be cultural. It could be religious. It could be scientific. But you're not going to see the world without structure. And if you are looking at the world with a much more newer and untested structure, God knows what you've opened up. You don't know what you're going to, you get to atheism, which is one thing, but then you turned into atheism plus, which was basically, let's have all the parts, like we don't need to believe in God, fair enough, but let's bring in the social positive aspects of religion into it. And that's where you get the birth of wokeism. So, look what we've just created. We've created a new religion in place of the hole that was left from the previous religion, because it's our nature as humans to want to create something through which we attach meaning to in this life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. If you could improve the military outlook in Canada,
what would I do?
What would you do, Mr. Richard?
To improve the military.
Do we need to be bigger, smaller, tighter?
We need to be more efficient.
More efficient.
Less bureaucracy, less people at desks. Be very hard. But that would be, to me, there's a lot of fat you can trim. I've seen entire offices where I swear if they vanished, nobody would notice. Like somebody described it once. There was one building. They say it's this big government building full of military people. And I said, what exactly they do? And it's it's a self-looking ice cream cone. Basically, they exist so they can continue making themselves exist.
Don't forget, I lived in Greece for 10 years, so I totally know what that's all about.
So there's a lot of that, and so there's a lot of fat that could be trimmed. We could be more efficient, and that would improve. But I also think remembering what we are. We're unfortunately becoming more of a government department instead of a military. And I think if we acted like a military, advertise it as a military, like the Americans do. Did you see the Marine Corps advertisement? They got the right idea. The one with where it's check it out on YouTube, and it's pretty intense, and it basically shows a combat scenario. But stuff like that, I think you're going to get the right people.
Yeah, it's something about like there was this period of time where like things get watered down, and it happens in many sectors. And like, well, we need to, open it up and create a wider umbrella to attract. I can see the logic behind it, but it never really works. And you end up getting a whole lot of nothing, which in a total sum means you're weaker than stronger. Mm-hmm. Even something as benign as like, fast food trying to be healthy in the 90s. Screw off. I'm going to Wendy's. I want a Baconator. You know why? I know it's bad for me, and I want a big, juicy fucking hamburger, and that's why I'm there. And don't try to sell me like, well, you can have your hamburger and have no, I'm here to have a hamburger. Mm-hmm. Like let's not beat around the bush. Yep. Or, I don't know, we're Catholic and we're having pizza day on Sundays for the kids to attract them. This is church. It sucks. Come be here. Listen to the thing. This is what it is. You might end up with a little bit less, but at least those who go there are very pure in what they're looking for.
Exactly. Exactly.
So when it comes to the army, like it's a fucking army, okay? And it's going to be good and softer. Things change, but don't kid yourself. It's an army or a navy or military, whatever you want to call it. And just be pure. And then I think what you might end up with smaller, but you're going to end up smaller and more efficient and therefore more effective.
Right.
You have a basic training in Canada?
Of course.
Okay. Is that, how many weeks is that? And everybody has to go to it?
I think something like, I think they're lowering it to 8 weeks. I think 12 weeks for officers.
Okay.
And then there's environmental training after that often. So if you're going for combat arms, you'll do your basic training, and then you'll do things like common army phase, or there'll be also trade training. But yeah, there's basic training.
Okay.
Basic trainings, marching, your uniform, how to maintain your uniform.
Did they still make you fold your bed properly?
Yeah,
man.
They'll
That was my biggest nightmare.
Fold your socks. You have to fold your socks, your underwear a certain way.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks like the hard part of basic training is getting up in the morning and going for a run. No, it's all the little attention to detail, and make sure your underwear is folded 5 by 5 and your socks are folded so they look like they're frowning at you when you open your drawer. And everything's got to be in its place and it's totally clean, no dust.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. You lose all control. And if you're, older and you're used to having things your own way, it's an adaptation. But I don't think they're making it easier and easier. And I don't know if it matters that it's easier because, your combat school and everything that they send you, they can correct anything afterwards. So if they're going to send you to combat and you're kind of soft when you do your workups and everything like that, or your pre-deployment training, they'll toughen you up at that point.
Yeah.
So, you learn to march, you learn to pull apart your gun and put it back together again and things like that.
I remember there was a general it's a famous YouTube clip, and he was some speech he was giving in the States. And he went on about, do you know why we do that kind of stuff in the mornings when you have to fold up your socks and make your bed properly? It's not because that really matters in the grand scheme of things, the way you would think it matters, but it's setting the day's tone. You're getting the first task of the day out of the way early. And from there, all the other tasks fall much easier. And I'm not a military kind of guy, but I always respected that. Like when I do my ice baths, ice showers in the morning, like this going to suck. But once I'm done that, I'm like, man, it's only 7:05 and I already got the first hard thing out of the day out of the way. And everything else, it's like setting a pattern of behavior.
Yes.
And everything else, you just actually accelerate upwards in terms of your results. So it can seem like a small little task, but it's like the trip of 1,000 steps it starts with one step kind of thing. 1,000 miles starts with one step. You get that first step out of the way. And I think there's a lot that youth could learn from that today.
Oh, for sure. And
it's momentum building in a positive way.
And attention to detail, which is huge, especially for officers. Attention to detail. So noticing tiny little things. So and situational awareness, right? Making sure everyone built, pulls as a team. And you're right though.
Well, it's like almost like being a good detective, right? Like you're kind of training the eye to notice things, whereas like I'm oblivious to things. Like I could walk out and somebody be like, "Oh, so what were Richard and Dimitri wearing today?" And I could have no idea.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
They both look great, but
right.
but it's a good skill, I would imagine, especially in that vocation.
Yeah, we still do the basic training. They are making it easier. They can't yell at people like they used to.
They can't call you scum to your face and stuff like that.
Really, eh?
So it's
damn.
It's a lot. They're a lot. They do yell because sometimes you're addressing 50 people, and they gotta hear you, so they will yell. And but you got to be able to still stress people out because dealing with stress is part of basic training.
Right.
Right. So there's going to be a lot of yelling when things kick off, and you got to be able to not let it bother you. So we'll see. Some people might be a little bit more sensitive coming through.
Being a military guy,
maybe that won't matter at the end of the day. Maybe because can you honestly prepare for war? That's the question. Right?
That is one hell of a question.
War is the worst thing in the world, and maybe all the training in the world, you're still going to get people that can't handle it, or maybe they can. I don't know.
It's certain jobs can you train to be prime minister?
Yeah.
Can you train to be mayor?
Right.
Can you train to go to war? Like, not really.
But we can do things that have worked for us in the past, and. I don't know. We'll see what the new recruits are like when they're done basic. The softer, easier basic. So I don't know. We're going to watch and wait.
Yeah, cool.
When you think of the wars we've been involved with, though, like World War One, World War Two, even the Afghan war, it's we seem to be prepared. Like when you read about the stuff, we sort of overperform. So whatever we were doing in the past seems to be working.
work, right?
I think we know still how to ramp things up, and that's one of the reasons why I think the countries in the Commonwealth did so well is that maybe you might have a lot more information on this, but I have the suspicion that the British military mechanisms, when it realized it can no longer be the empire sprawling the earth like it once was, that system of meritocracy got downloaded into the civil services. So our judicial systems still work based on merit. Our police forces based on merit. Our schooling system, our education system. It all has to start from somewhere. And where would it have started from, germinated from? From the British military. Have you ever heard anything like that at all? Like any kind of lineage that we're living through?
No.
Like we're all descendants of that sort of meritocracy. And when when you really feel it, when you step outside of the Commonwealth, and then you're like, whew, things in this country are a little bit like all over the place. And then you realize it's just cultural. Like the civil service isn't really on top of things. The police aren't really on top of things. The military there. And you're like, wow, this is actually systemically built into the way they're living. Why are New Zealand, Australia, Canada, America, and on, the ones that were part of that, not operating in that level? I'm like, I think it got downloaded, the meritocracy of the British military, into our civil service when there was no longer a need for such a big military.
That's a really great observation, and I've never thought of that. So I'm not going to try to comment on that.
Fun.
But I can't see anything wrong with what you said.
It's cultural.
It is very much cultural, and
it just feels natural to do it that way. And why does it feel natural?
We should try to keep it right because,
And is it under threat when we allow, let's say, as we soften through immigration and we allow other people's too much, downtrodden voices, but if they become too amplified, we got to make sure that we don't rescind on some of those long inherited and proven techniques that have allowed us to become the country they all want to immigrate to in the first place.
That's just it, right? If you're going to come to Canada, you're leaving someplace behind for a reason. Remember that when you get here.
And they're not leaving too often from other Commonwealth countries to come here.
No.
So we got a tier system.
Right.
One more thing. So have you watched the movie 300?
I've seen parts of it.
Yeah. Do military people do they ever talk about that kind of movie? The 300 Spartans.
The phalanxes.
Yeah. versus the million Persians, and because it's kind of like one of the first, and I know it's done in a very comic book fashion, but one of the first look at this organized small military going against this juggernaut. And yes, they did kind of lose, but in the end, that loss set off the victory that came further down the road. Do they ever teach this sort of history in the military?
I never got taught that.
That's interesting.
There are strategic studies at Royal Military College and things like that. They probably talk about it there.
Like Alexander and against Darius. These are amazing tactics.
A little bit of Trafalgar and Nelson at Trafalgar with the naval battles, and a lot of criticizing of military movies, saying, "Hey, that's not how it works," right?
Sure.
You can imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, I would imagine, just the military apparatus. Like you can say, talk about the Battle of Agincourt. It's like, well, we don't use arrows anymore. You know what I mean?
No, but so some of the, the Spartans all had long hair. So I could see somebody in the army today going, well, if the greatest warriors of all time had long hair, can I not have my hair a little longer?
Well, that was it, right? So if you think about it, we allowed women to have long hair. We allowed certain people from certain Aboriginal cultures who didn't like to cut their hair, them to have long hair. Mm-hmm. Sikhs could have long hair, right? So, you can have long hair, you can have long hair, you can't have long hair, you can't have long hair. Let's just make everybody have long hair, allow everybody to have long hair and make it easier.
Yeah.
It just, I thought that was a good idea. I think the original cutting of the hair thing was more for basic training and just for efficiency, cleanliness, and also to dehumanize you a little bit, separate you from society. People see you and they know you're
individuality.
What you are, crush that individuality, make you all the same. So,
but that's part of it, isn't it? That makes you like a good soldier. Like that's the part of the unit, right? like, so I don't know, to take that away and say, no, let's make sure everybody has their own individual expressions. It's like, well, that's not what it's about.
Your individuality might get me killed.
Yeah. Like,
Imagine that on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have an army if nobody joins, right? So they make
Do
it
you
a
see how
little
quick
more,
they break the rules when they need to have more
it's like the
recruits come up?
Catholics.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So, what would you rather have? People with long hair that, might, be a little half-assed, or no people at all?
Yeah, I appreciate the pragmatic
but
approach.
I actually think, though, we might have scared people off that might have wanted to join and wanted to join the old school military. And they think, well, if it's going to be a bunch of people with long green hair, I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So not that there's really not that many people with long green
Well, I would
hair,
imagine
though.
a young Spartan kid would have been like, well, the greatest people in our society are these amazing Spartan warriors. I hope I can fit the bill and become one. Yeah. It's something to aspire to.
Yeah.
And it's going to be grueling, but my God, if I achieve it, have I achieved something worthwhile?
Right.
While. So that's I think really key, like to have the end goal be something like I'm actually better for this experience.
Yeah.
Not just financially, like emotionally, spiritually better.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I think that's why
stronger.
A lot of the marine advertisements kind of hit that well. The American Army need to come up a bit. They're not.
Be all you can be. That wasn't that the American Army?
Yeah, I think they brought that back. So,
let's see. Off the wall question here, not to pull like a Lex Friedman, but in terms of any UFO, anything that you've heard of that?
No,
shut that down pretty quick.
No UFOs.
China balloon things.
China balloons. Some, this talk that wasn't even from China. I don't know. Maybe some balloon hobbyists wanted a free air show. I think maybe one of them came from China.
I thought it was the Oakville teacher's breast. Maybe that just expanded too far and went up.
So you didn't. You haven't heard in any of the corners.
But I mean, I wouldn't, right?
Well, I guess it would be classified, but I mean, I just figured you'd all in the mess hall.
The NORAD boys, I think, would be the ones that talk to about that.
Right. All right. Well, I guess that's
pretty deep.
It. Yeah, I mean,
it was a good run.
Is interesting chat. Like I'd love to talk more about. Like it's interesting getting a different perspective on. Like I enjoy reading about like the military history and stuff like that. But it's I've never been in one. I was in the cadets or whatever when I was a kid. But yeah.
Air?
It's also what's that?
Air or Army?
Army. Yeah. It was for like a couple of years. Yeah.
Nice.
What made you do that?
I don't think it was me. I think I was sort of pushed into it.
How old
My
were you?
parents wanted me out of the house.
How old were you when you do something like that?
Young. I would have been probably early teens.
Yeah. See, at that age, I would have idolized doing something like that too.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it's like joining a hockey team or something. It's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
That was the 80s, right?
Must have been.
Yeah, it was probably the late 80s.
Military was cool then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just went to Beavers. But still, it was like I enjoyed being part of something like that.
Yeah.
Same with when you're playing hockey. It's your team. You're taking shifts. You're standing up, defending the guy next to you. Like it's a great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just loved it, man.
Yeah.
Like if they tried to water down hockey and be like, it's so inclusive. You're like, yeah, that's good, but I just want to play freaking hockey. Can we just leave that stuff alone?
Yeah.
Well, aren't they kind of watering down hockey with the fighting?
A lot of people just don't like it anymore. Like the talent is up, but I just don't feel the emotion. It's kind of like watching Mike Tyson, more of like a visceral animal, fight Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis was an amazing boxer. Nobody's ever going to make a movie on Lennox Lewis because he's not inspirational. You watch him and you fall asleep, and he's really good. Maybe the best of his generation. Who gives a shit? Like you just don't care. Right. There's something about that raw animal instinct that has to come out.
Right.
I don't care about the quality. Like show me you're giving everything you have. That's what I care. And I don't care what color you are, what gender you are. Just give it your all. But don't water it down with politics afterwards and tell me I'm a bad person or all this because I was born a certain way. I'm as bad as a person being as born a certain way as those who were once called bad people and now we know aren't.
Right.
Like reversing it doesn't make it any better. Just everyone's equal, and can we just move on with it?
They're watering down hockey.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know if I should say what if we're going really all in on the diversity, inclusion, equity stuff. but it's feels superficial. Doesn't feel like it's from the heart. And I'll tell you, playing house league hockey from the 70s, we had every shape and color playing hockey with us. So it was always diverse, in my opinion. And to be quite, one year we actually had a trial game against girls that were like a year or so older than us, and they kicked our asses.
Oh, wow.
And you know what? It was an amazing, humbling experience. And you go into the corners, we were allowed to hit because we were over 12 and you were allowed to hit at that age. And the women were brutal. And you know what? You came out of that game with respect. Like that girl pounded me, man. And it was a great learning experience. So why do we need to then like try to put all this politics into it? Just let the kids play together.
Yeah.
And they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Who's that? There's a goalie. Who was it?
The French goalie from, in the 90s?
No. So recent, like just last night after the Leafs game, it was like I read the sort of statement where his team, I can't remember his team, was all putting on LGBT bans, and he refused to. He said, "My religion is such that I don't." So it was this big controversy.
He's hard Christian.
Yeah, hard Christian, and then.
But why can't he just be the way he wants to be?
Well, so that was the thing.
He's now the new gay guy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like he's being ostracized for his beliefs.
So the team, to their credit, put out a statement and said, "Look, we respect. We'll continue to do the LGBT thing because it's something we believe in. We also respect our players' individual choices." And I was like, "That's
fair.
That's the way it should be."
Don't force people. Don't coerce people.
Yeah.
It's a much better place today, the world, in terms of inclusivity and diversity, as it should be,
than
years ago. But you don't have to make it like I said, installed and mandatory. And if someone is a little behind the curve, show some patience and just let them be. They'll get to it when it's their time, if it's their thing.
Yeah.
But to sit there and ostracize them because they're not into something, it's as pious as the other people were acting pseudo fashion to those people before.
Well, and also he's not going out of his way to say anything negative against him. He's just like, look, I just have my own thing, and I don't believe that I need to do this. And anyway, so I was kind of inspired by.
And furthermore, the countries that we are working very hard to allow them to have more inclusivity in Canadian culture, those cultures who are non-Christian, we're talking more east of the Central Europe, in Eastern Europe, okay? They are far harsher on those types of people.
Which religion are you talking
about? The religion that shall not be named. But they're far. But there's the West is more into this sort of stuff.
Yeah, they got countries where they made it illegal. Tanzania made homosexuality illegal.
Yeah. So to sit there and say to this one guy, like all of a sudden he's got to be isolated and called out is absolutely bonkers.
Well, it's posturing. It's just political posturing. It's
virtue signaling used to just be called hypocrisy, right? Like just don't be a hypocrite. Just let the guy be who he is.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's. Anyone have anything else to say, or
no?
We wrap this.
That was great. Yeah. No, it was. I think we moved forward here a bit, and having Richard here help us work through some of the military stuff was an insight that would have taken me years and years to figure out on my own.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. I hope we have you again. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will bid you adieu.
Take care.
Take care.